How many times in the past month, have you had to call something or someone out for being unfair? When we see unfair things happen, it can bring a bunch of different feelings for different people. So think for a minute, what are the top 2 feelings that you experience when something unfair happens? Do you feel sadness, disappointment, anger, insecurity, frustration? Unfortunately, we know that life doesn't always end up the way that we think it's supposed to be. When something feels unfair, it can bring up a lot of emotions in a person. With that in mind, today we're going to look back at a time when Jesus did the exact opposite. He did something that most people would consider unfair. For the last few weeks, we've been talking about the things that Jesus said and did before he was crucified. This week, we're going to talk about something Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, did to Jesus before the crucifixion. One of Jesus' friends, Peter, was the friend that you don't take to a party because he may have something offensive to say to somebody, or before you know it, you're in a fight. Peter was the kind of follower of Jesus that most of us can relate to. In this particular situation, Jesus was finishing up dinner with his disciples after sharing some difficult news with them. He had just shared that one of the disciples around the table was going to betray him. And of course, Peter is the one who responds and speaks up without thinking it through. Check it out. Peter declared, "Even if everyone else detests you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied to him, "I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. "No," Peter insisted. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." Now, at this point in their lives, the disciples had been learning from Jesus' teaching for years. But our friend Peter was convinced that he would never deny Jesus. There's no way he would betray his teacher. But just a few hours later, while Jesus was going through a frightening trial that would lead to his death, Peter was approached by some townspeople who asked if he was one of Jesus' disciples. And 3 times, one right after the other, Peter denied that he even knew Jesus, his teacher and friend. What would you do if your best friend acted like they didn't even know you on the most difficult night of your life? Well, here's what Jesus did. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question. "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep." Jesus said a 3rd time and asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked this question a 3rd time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." Jesus was showing Peter that their relationship could be restored. Jesus made sure to restore the friendship back to the same solid place that it was before denial. It would have been totally fair for Jesus to respond to Peter by not even acknowledging his presence, or by losing his temper with Peter, or by lecturing him. But instead, Jesus confirmed that Peter still loved him, and then reestablished their friendship. Just like that. Jesus' response was 100% unfair in the best way possible. So another word to describe the way Jesus treated Peter is grace. Grace is being unfairly good to someone who doesn't deserve it. It was the situation between Jesus and Peter. God's grace is unfairly good. Even though we're not perfect, we mess up daily. God is always willing to extend grace for the sake of the relationship we have with God. It's a gift that's given when you don't deserve it. When you mess up, God's always willing to forgive you and show you grace. That's just who He is. The question is, are you ready to receive it? In fact, that's the first thing I want you to do in response to God's grace. I want you to accept it. God's grace is a gift that we don't deserve. Accept the opportunity to have a good relationship with God. When it comes to grace, being unfair is okay because God's grace is unfairly good. And here's the next thing. Share it. 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loved him. This was Jesus giving Peter an assignment to take care of all the people Jesus loves and cares for. It's the kind of assignment Jesus gives everyone that has a relationship with him and chooses to follow him, to feed his sheep. God gives us the same grace Peter was given, which means our job is not done. Imagine what would change in the way you think and see God based on God's unfair good grace. Imagine how different your life would look in our world, would look if we were more intentional about receiving and giving grace. As you head out today, I want you to think about what a fair response would be if you've disappointed someone, abandoned them, or let them down. The best part is, you can be confident that God's grace is unfairly good.
There is power, wonder-working power.